All right, so the objectives for today are to explore the top 10 causes of stubborn fat loss that I have been able to see in my practice and have really been a cornerstone of helping people address this issue, especially when they're trying multiple factors and not getting results. We're going to learn some of the quick fixes that a lot of people aren't doing, but are still really impactful on getting results to help you start making some progress right away. And then we're going to discuss some of the more advanced approaches that I take when these quick fixes don't really work out, right? And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. All right, so if you're here, I'm guessing that you've probably been trying to lose excess body fat either now or in the past, or plan to in the future, but you're not seeing the results that you might have expected. So sometimes it's a little bit of a frustrating process figuring out what works for you, what diet works for you. And don't worry, you're not the only one. There's a lot of people out there that are in the same exact boat. And so that's why I kind of wanted to bring people together today to give a feel of, how challenging this process can really be. Even though you see tons of people, on social media or online, with all of their progress and their success, it's definitely not always the case. And a lot of people are trying to lose weight by following difficult diets like the keto or the Atkins diet. They're also trying to lose weight through medications such as the new semaglutide or Ozempic or phentermine, things that have, definitely been on the market for years. There's also lots of meal replacement programs out there that people follow that completely substitute what they're eating with shakes. Essentially, people will resort to removing parts of their stomach or their intestines with gastric bypass surgery. People will also just start starving themselves, start eating way less food, and ultimately, decreasing their quality of life significantly. And some people just resort to hoping and praying that the weight will fall off. So there's a lot of really aggressive approaches out there. And I don't really find that many of these are sustainable, right? These are approaches that, really require significant alterations to your lifestyle, to your quality of life, and sometimes to your body. And they're not really designed for a root cause approach. And so that is why I am here to present to you guys some of the information that hopefully can provide insight into what could be part of the root cause so we can address stubborn fat loss holistically. All right, so let's jump on in. So the reasons that you're not losing fat, top 10 reasons. Number one, most people would not agree, but I definitely see in my clinical practice that most people are not eating or drinking enough. Most people are skipping breakfast or other meals throughout the day, and they're really not consuming enough calories, enough protein, enough nutrients in general just to sustain baseline metabolic function. A lot of people have this idea that less is more when it comes to weight loss. That's quite the alternative. Let me let this person in. So a lot of people are actually really struggling to eat enough, and for some reason it's been touted that that's the ideal way to go about losing weight. But in reality, it's much more the case that when people eat more food, they tend to lose more. And there's a lot of reasoning behind that, and we're going to jump into those different factors. Another big thing is that people aren't drinking enough water. A lot of people are only drinking 30, 40 ounces a day, and they're really dehydrated. And it's not enough to sustain the metabolic functions that you need to lose body fat to support the metabolic reactions that are necessary within cells and in your blood. And also people are often over caffeinated, right? I'm definitely, one to blame in this case, but it's really important even in that situation to drink more water and to make sure that you're optimizing your ability to reach baseline metabolic function. So reason number two is that you're not exercising enough, or you're not exercising the right way. Right? I see this all the time. People are trying to lose weight by walking more, which is a great place to start, but it's not always going to do the nitty-gritty, work that your body really needs to tap into body fat stores, right? You need to increase that heart rate. You need to be able to condition yourself. And on the other side of the spectrum, some people are working out too much. They're only doing high intensity, or they're exercising 6 to 7 days per week. And when you're in that situation, you might be overinflaming yourself. You might not be recovering properly. And that can create an inflammatory situation that turns off fat loss. It also depletes a lot of nutrients, which can inhibit your ability to lose body fat. Other people are avoiding strength training, and this is definitely, really important if you're on a low-calorie diet, because you're more likely to have a lower protein intake and as a result lose more muscle mass. And so when you lose muscle mass, your metabolism actually decreases, and you might find that it's difficult for you to maintain fat loss, right? We want to increase the metabolism, we want to increase muscle mass, we want to increase your ability to expend calories. Now, some people are injured or disabled, and that becomes a strong barrier for these kinds of movements. And so you really want to think about, can you work with a professional, whether it's a physical therapist, personal trainer, that can give you some creative insight on how to move your body in ways that aren't going to hurt you? Or are there other diets or nutritional supplements that you can experiment with in order to maybe cut some of those corners where you wouldn't be able to otherwise? So reason number 3 is you're not getting enough sleep, right? This is unfortunately way too common. People are getting, 4 or 5 hours of sleep at night, or they're just dealing with the really frustrating condition of insomnia or sleep apnea, or it's difficult to fall asleep or difficult to stay asleep. And the real issue is that the quality of your sleep is not deep enough to sustain recovery, to sustain detoxification, and to support hormonal balance that is supportive of weight loss ultimately. I see a lot of people staying up late, using their iPhone, using their TV, their computer. That's definitely more thing these days with social media being so popular. And it's just a habitual thing that people need to start thinking twice about. How much light are they consuming? How much stimulating information are they consuming? Or caffeine that's ultimately making it difficult for their brain to reach a deeper state of relaxation. So definitely something that I like to focus on a lot if there's, areas where we can work on with behavior. And then also from a nutritional perspective, how can we optimize your ability to fall asleep and stay asleep? So reason number 4 is you're dealing with too much stress. It was actually really tempting for me to make this number 1, but a lot of people out there that I work with are dealing with stressful jobs, long hours, multiple kids, lots of responsibilities, and it's just the reality that our society has created a lot of reason to have too much to do. And a lot of these people do kind of have these limiting beliefs that they're subjected to these stressful lifestyles without any room for relaxation or self-care. And so that's where it becomes important to kind of think about your stress management routine and where can you start to work in certain types of self-care behaviors to mitigate some of the stress that you're experiencing. Things like this will impact your cortisol levels, your inflammatory burden, your nutritional status, your appetite. And so there's lots of reasons behind how stress might impact weight loss in particular. And some of this is also, and I like to highlight this because a lot of people don't think about it, but there's a lot of reasons to believe that stress is a product of physiological issues. Like you can have a magnesium deficiency, for example, that makes you more susceptible to stress, where when you start to replete that nutrient deficiency, you're no longer dealing with the amount of anxiety, the amount of stress and tension that you might have had before. And so there's an important approach that you need to take when you're dealing with a lot of stress to make sure that you're giving yourself the best foot forward from a physiological perspective. Reason number 5 is you're eating inflammatory foods. Okay, I actually think that of all the testing that I do, this is probably the most impactful. And that's because a lot of people don't really realize that the foods that they're eating are inflammatory. And yes, there's the obvious things like alcohol and sugar that a lot of people are aware of, but oftentimes even healthy foods like bread or even I see pineapple or strawberries, it can actually be considered inflammatory when your immune system simply starts to become sensitized by it. And that has a lot to do with your digestion, has a lot to do with your inflammatory condition, whether you're infected, stressed a lot. Different factors can come together to induce a situation where you're now becoming inflamed by quote unquote healthy foods. And so symptoms might tell you about that, but more importantly, testing tells you about that. And so you can begin to personalize your diet that way. and reduce inflammation. Um, Food allergies are another big part of this category that a lot of people will probably already know because they're very obvious symptoms. You might have like itching, hives, throat closing, anaphylaxis. So those kinds of things people typically pick up on, but definitely even on low grade levels can be impactful. And there's also food chemical intolerances, something that a lot of people don't really think about, but there's chemicals in your foods like histamines, oxalates, and of course, additives like preservatives that can create detoxification reactions in your body that are inflammatory and just simply reflect a nutritional deficiency, maybe a digestive issue or an issue with your gut that can then be fixed to make you less intolerable to these foods. And so definitely something that I like to highlight as a possibility when it comes to personalizing your diet. All right, number 6 is you aren't getting enough or using enough oxygen. So we need oxygen to be able to burn calories, to be able to function in general physiologically. And there's a lot of different causes that could be behind low utilization or consumption of oxygen. And anemia is probably the most common. It's caused by sometimes iron deficiency, sometimes B vitamin deficiencies, and sometimes other deficiencies, like it could be copper, it could be vitamin E, and sometimes it's caused by infection, sometimes it's caused by blood loss. And so there's a number of different things that could be related to anemia. And when you're anemic, you simply can't transport or utilize oxygen very well. Sometimes it's also a matter of conditioning, and this is where the VO2 max comes in. This is a measure of how much oxygen your cells are capable of consuming based off of how many mitochondria each cell has created within itself. Whereas the mitochondria are these little engines, these little tiny engines that burn and utilize energy and, give us life essentially. And so we want to have more of those. And that's what athletes do. They train themselves, they condition themselves, and that's the product of conditioning is more mitochondria. And so they can consume and use more oxygen. And so you can imagine the more oxygen that you consume, the more calories you can burn. And if you're really deconditioned, you're not going to have a strong capacity to do that. And as a result, your exercise won't go as far. A lot of people also aren't breathing properly. This is probably more minor, but when you're exercising, you really want to focus on your breath and how you're utilizing or how you're consuming oxygen when you exercise, because that can make a big difference. And also, I see sleep apnea a lot, which can induce a state of hypoxia or low oxygen levels simply because you're not breathing properly. And that can induce situations where your oxygen levels are low enough to the point where it's creating inflammation and it's inhibiting your ability to lose body fat. All right, next is your hormones are all out of balance. And this could probably be a whole lecture all on its own. But really, what I see most frequently is elevations in insulin levels, which is a product of sugar intake, a product of stress, a product of a number of different factors. And insulin's job is really to turn off weight loss and to induce weight gain, right? It's really part of the metabolic process of anabolism, of building. And so we want to think about why that could be increased to levels that are unhealthy. Usually that has to do with insulin resistance, and we would probably want to dive deeper into where that comes from. Other hormones would be salivary cortisol. This is something that's largely related to stress levels, but could also be a product of infections and other kinds of sources of inflammation. And some people are just genetically more cortisol dominant, and that can be something we figure out through trial and error or through testing, but just really require a little bit more stress management and sometimes nutraceuticals to help control that. I also see low vitamin D way more than I ever thought I would. And vitamin D has such an important role on producing neurotransmitters, producing hormones. And so there's a lot of reason why vitamin D could be inhibiting weight loss, just from a metabolic and even a behavioral component standpoint. Yeah. I also see hypothyroidism a lot, and this is something we kind of work with by addressing more root issues like stress or gut issues. And this is something, that really does affect weight gain. And a number of different ways, but more from an energetic balance perspective. So we kind of just work on that level. And then also I see a lot of elevations or deficiencies in testosterone and estrogen or progesterone. And those things also, just like with thyroid, I kind of address from a root cause approach. And so those things, they'll affect weight because they modify your metabolism, they modify your mood, they modify how, your fat cells actually are accessible or not. And so there's a lot of different mechanisms involved, but by fixing some of the more root issues, you can actually start to see a lot of these hormonal imbalances fix themselves. Reason number 8 is you have functional gut issues. So we see this quite a bit where the gut microbiome is just simply deficient, right? Or the individual isn't eating enough fiber or probiotic foods or probiotic supplements in order to sustain a diversity that helps to produce enough short-chain fatty acids, enough micronutrients, and also to support the balance of hormones in the gut that regulate appetite and even regulate, your balance of sex hormones. And so all of those factors combined can produce an environment that is obesogenic or is conducive to weight gain. And there's also issues with absorption and digestion of nutrients. And so like if you have dysfunctional gut motility, whether it's too slow, meaning you have constipation, that's going to contribute to more dysbiosis. It's also going to contribute to a toxic state where your toxins aren't being excreted properly. And if you have diarrhea, that will contribute to an inability of people to, let me go ahead and let's present it, to absorb the nutrients that you're eating because your motility is so fast that you're not really given the chance to absorb some of those nutrients. And so all these functional issues can contribute to a mixture of nutritional deficiencies, inflammatory conditions, and hormonal imbalances. And then, of course, you have inflammatory bowel diseases where simply your immune system is reacting in a dysfunctional way to some of the tissues in your gut. And as a result, it's going to start to deteriorate that tissue barrier, and you're going to see some malabsorption, you're going to see some inflammation, and all of those things can contribute to an inability to lose body fat. Reason number 9 is you have chronic inflammation. And so I've thrown around that word inflammation quite a bit so far. And so I kind of want to explain what that means. Inflammation is really just when your immune system is reacting to something in your body, either for a short period of time or for an extended period of time. And so in chronic inflammation, it would be an extended period of time. And so the immune system, we have B cells and T cells and all these different kinds of cells. And what they do is they can engulf an invader. They can try to break down an invader with something called a reactive oxygen species. And they can also try to target something and incapacitate it with immunoglobulins, which are these little sticky tacks that it kind of shoots out in order to incapacitate certain toxins or pathogens. So what we see in chronic inflammation really is the excess production of these immunological tactics of defense, such as the reactive oxygen species. And they essentially build up and they have, the purpose of attacking infections, but they also have reciprocal damage where they can effectively damage cells and mitochondria and tissue. And when that happens, you'll start to see a decrease in the ability to consume and utilize energy in the case of mitochondrial damage. And you'll also see an increase of inflammation as those cells become more damaged. They send signals out to the immune system saying, hey, I'm broken, I'm damaged, I need you to come clean me up before I create more problems. And so then that creates an inflammatory response that just completely compounds and builds into a more inflamed state. And so this can happen as a result of chronic infections, autoimmune conditions, CIRS, which stands for chronic inflammatory response syndrome. This is something that is a little bit of a mixture of an infection and a genetic issue where people have dysfunctional inflammatory reactions to certain infections like mold or antibiotic resistant bacterias. and other kinds of toxins, Lyme's disease, etc. And so these kinds of situations will both produce an environment and a physiological state that ultimately inhibits your ability to lose body fat because of the increase of cortisol, the increase of insulin resistance that happens as a result of this inflammation. And then oxidative stress is really just the effect of those reactive oxygen species over consuming a particular tissue or a cell, and to the point where those mitochondria are not functioning very well. And so that's chronic inflammation. Reason number 10 is that you have a toxicity issue. So this is kind of similar to inflammation, but it's a little bit different in that toxins, similar to infections, but different in that these toxins are elements, they're chemicals, they're, little tiny pieces of bacteria or whatever that come into your body that your liver or your excretory systems have a difficult time getting rid of, right? And so we have a wonderful system designed to break down and excrete toxins from our body, but sometimes it gets overwhelmed. Sometimes we are overloaded with toxins so much that our livers can't get rid of them all. Sometimes these toxins are not easily degradable, and this has definitely been the case ever since the chemical revolution back in the early 1900s. All of us have some toxins in us that we'll never be able to get rid of, unfortunately, because they just were created not to be able to be broken down. Now, when it becomes a problem is when those toxins build up and they start to inhibit the ability of our metabolic systems to function. And that's because those metabolic functions are run by enzymes, and heavy metals like mercury or cadmium or arsenic can actually get in there and break apart those biochemical pathways and inhibit them from working properly. We also see toxins directly inhibiting our ability to function hormonally by blocking the receptors on cells and the ability of the hormones to attach to them to do what they got to do. We also see them drastically impacting our brain and our ability to produce dopamine. And so there's a lot of ways that toxins can begin to inhibit our ability to lose body fat or lose body weight through metabolic issues that they create. And the things that I see most frequently, I've been seeing mold toxicity a lot more often now that I live in California, which is where a lot of humidity and a lot of mold tends to grow. But heavy metal toxins are also really popular. Just when people have an inability to excrete like heavy metals like mercury, they tend to build up. There's a lot of environmental toxins now from all the different cosmetics, polluted areas, different kinds of contaminants in water. And then microbial toxins are, of course, another issue, kind of, an extension of what we already talked about. And then also hormone toxicities, especially in my girls that have, really heavy menstrual cycles or dysfunctional or dysregulated cycles where their estrogen is just so abundant that they can't get rid of it, and it creates a toxicity. So definitely an interesting topic that we could probably dissect way more in depth if we wanted to. But yes. All right. So checking in just a little bit. How's everybody doing? Hopefully so far you're not feeling too overwhelmed. I know that can be a lot of information and can definitely lead to maybe a couple different self-diagnoses. But what I want you to think about is just how we can start to peel these different pieces apart step by step and start with the basics. And so that's ultimately what I want to go into next, is the quick fixes. So the low-hanging fruit, right? So these are the things that I think everybody should really be trying to incorporate more often, things that really make the biggest difference, but in some cases can be the hardest things to do. So first and foremost, starting with drinking more water, right? So being able to drink 64 to 80 ounces of filtered water each day. A lot of people will find that it's easier if you have a water bottle that you can put right in front of you, that you have within your periphery, that might be clear so that you can see how much water you drink, or that has a carrying case so that you can carry it with you while you're mobile or walking around. Just you have to be creative so that you have access to water at any moment, pretty much. Another thing is eating around 2,000 calories per day of unprocessed, organic, whole foods with a focus on antioxidant intake. And I chose 2,000 calories because, from my experience, that tends to be where most people are able to get enough antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, omega-3s from their diet, so they don't have to think so meticulously about what they eat. Now, can you get enough nutrients on a 1,600 calorie diet? Yes, absolutely. But you have to be very intentional about what you're eating so that you know that you're getting enough of those micronutrients to support your metabolism. And then a lot of people could benefit from exercising at least 4 days a week. I try to encourage people to do more days than not, but not to overdo it, right? And this can be personalized according to how much how much you sleep and how much of an inflammatory burden you might have, because you just don't want to put your body into a state where it's unable to recover. And so there's multiple factors you have to consider there. I do recommend having a mixture of strength and cardio so that you can condition yourself in different ways and also encourage muscle building. And to get at least 2 days of rest, either through just taking a day off or through active rest. Next, practicing good sleep hygiene. And so this can sometimes just be a bit of a knowledge gap of knowing which things affect your sleep the most. And really just starts with removing sources of stimulation. So drinking caffeine earlier, removing, the consumption of stimulating screens like iPhones, TVs. TV isn't really always that bad, but iPhones and computers and iPads are probably the worst. Or incorporating like orange shaded glasses or blue light blocking glasses, and also managing your room to the point where it's very sleep oriented. So making sure that you have light blocking shades or a noise blocker if there's a noisy environment around you. Managing the temperature of your room and having a really comfortable bed. All these things, you just start to kind of address one by one to optimize your sleep quality. And then also trying to shift your sleep cycle a little bit earlier so that you can get to bed before 12 a.m., before 11 a.m., and get 8 hours of quality sleep. There's a lot of research showing that when you get sleep, like 8 hours of sleep earlier, even compared to somebody else that's getting the same amount of sleep later, you get better quality sleep. So definitely something I would recommend there. Next is practicing stress management. And for most of my patients, this starts by just simply taking more breaks and learning how to be intentional with your day, like whether that's practicing a little bit of deep breathing on your way to work or on your way home, maybe taking a couple minutes to close your eyes and just practice gratitude while you're on the toilet in the middle of the day, or whether you're just, taking some time before bed to stretch, or even getting a therapist and having some talk therapy or journaling about your feelings, like just getting more comfortable about this self-care routine to start, mitigating some of the stress that compounds on a daily basis. So those are the basics. Now I want to give you some extra tips on how to go about fine-tuning some other areas. So for metabolic healing, I usually help people work on optimizing blood sugar levels, which can be a very important piece of weight loss, just simply by eating more low glycemic meals, things that would be higher in protein, healthier fats, and high fiber foods. So I don't really think people have to go all the way to the point of keto in order to get a blood sugar stabilizing effect with their diet. I think it can help in certain situations, but for the most part, thinking of carbohydrates like as squash, legumes, and peas, as opposed to grains and rice and sugary foods, you're going to start to see a strong shift in your ability to regulate appetite, regulate your sleep schedule, regulate your energy levels. You'll start to really notice a big difference. And another thing that really helps is eating breakfast every single day. And that's because that's the time where we're doing the most, right? It's where we see our cortisol levels spiking. It's where we see our hormones spiking. It's where we see a lot of different, activities really, playing the most significant role in our day. We're also usually very caffeinated at that point of the day. And so it's important to have energy, to have protection, to have antioxidants, to give our bodies the ability to regulate those processes properly. And so eating breakfast every day, I find to be very helpful for a lot of people. And also optimizing fat utilization through utilizing interval training to increase your ability to consume and utilize oxygen. So that would be kind of just a personalized fitness approach, something that we would incorporate maybe like a 2-1 split, like 2 minutes jogging, 1 minute, maybe more of a light, moderate run, to try and increase the intensity to the point where your body isn't burning out, but your cells are stressed enough to want to build more mitochondria. Another thing that is really helpful is fasted cardio. And this doesn't have to be in the morning, it definitely can be, but it can also just be 3 to 4 hours after a meal. And that's basically just going to be the state where your blood sugar levels are the lowest. And so your body is more compelled to tap into some of the, sugar, glycogen stores of your liver, of your muscles, and also ultimately work towards building or utilizing more of your body fat. And so it encourages more of the production of enzymes that actually break down fat into energy. And so it can make it easier for you to burn body fat that way. Some extra tips for gut healing. So starting with digestion, something that I think a lot of people would benefit from is just slowing down and learning how to chew your food thoroughly and just being mindful and enjoying that experience. A lot of people really do struggle with bloating or indigestion and heartburn, and I feel like at least 30% of those dysfunctional issues are a result of eating too fast. And so utilizing your saliva and taking your time to chew really makes a big difference. Also, avoid eating too much at once. That's pretty obvious. Avoid eating before exercise, and also avoid eating too late in the day. All of these things can inhibit your ability to digest and absorb the nutrients from your foods that you want in order to utilize for weight loss. Also, it might be important to consider removing gluten or dairy or eggs. Like if you're not going to be doing food sensitivity testing, some of these foods might be inflaming you. And so I do recommend doing a little experiment. Now, if you're going to be cutting out a lot of foods, I recommend working with a professional just so that you can get some really good advice on how to increase the nutritional quality of your diet so that you're not cutting out too many nutrients. Next is to optimize your microbiome. And so this is as simple as just sometimes eating more probiotic foods like sauerkraut or kimchi as a nice little part of a sandwich or somewhere on the side. These foods can be a little bit irritable for some people, creating bloating or sometimes allergy reactions. And so just something to eat with caution. But otherwise, consuming enough fiber can also do the trick. So the goal is usually around 30 grams per day, but not just of any form of fiber, right? You want to get a variety of the types of fibers because not all bacteria eat every kind of fiber. And also there's different kinds of plant constituents like polyphenols, for example, that bacteria consume. And so getting this variety is really critical to get to have a diversity of microbes in your gut. Some extra tips for hormone balancing. And so this really is where if your blood work is showing up low hormones or your hormones are out of balance, this is where it becomes really important to avoid fasting for too long and just being regular. Try to get your body back into a rhythm that feels comfortable. Try to make sure you're getting sunlight or at least taking vitamin D every day. Taking a multivitamin and omega-3s can really help to replete some of those minerals that your body needs to support thyroid function, to support testosterone and estrogen balance. So Definitely just some quick, easy fixes you can throw in there. And then also detoxing from unnecessary chemicals, things like caffeine and sugar and smoking and alcohol can really do a number on your hormones. And also, I'll add one more there, and that's looking out for, sorry, looking out for environmental toxins coming from cosmetics, coming from water, coming from the air. There's a lot of endocrine disruptors out there. And so that's one thing that you might want to look into as well. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the quick fixes. Now we want to talk about some of the more advanced approaches, right? I love this meme, really cracks me up. All right, so advanced approaches, things that I would not recommend doing on your own. And this is maybe the process of identifying and removing food sensitivities, from detoxing from mold toxins or heavy metals, addressing chronic infections, personalizing a gut restoration protocol, restoring hormonal balance with nutraceuticals or maybe even medications, healing and ideally reversing autoinflammatory diseases or autoimmune diseases, and also addressing metabolic dysfunction like diabetes or liver disease. So you can even, get a professional to look deeper into your genetics and if they might be playing a role in your predisposition for weight gain or for different metabolic issues. And so all of these are things that a functional nutritionist or a functional medicine doctor might help you with in being able to create a personalized protocol for healing. And so how does a functional nutritionist go about something like this? So generally, we will start with functional testing and evaluations of your medical history and symptoms in order to get a really good idea of what your body is telling us and what might be going on. Different tests that we might do would be a comprehensive blood analysis. And so that's really, a very large scope. That could be a lot of different things, from looking at nutritional deficiencies, metabolic markers, signs of infection, different things. But really, that's something that you personalize according to what you might find on a medical history. And then we might also do comprehensive stool testing to look at your microbiome, to look at how you're digesting food, to look at the signs of inflammation in your gut. We would definitely do food sensitivity testing to rule out the possibility of inflammatory foods. We might look for toxins to rule out the possibility of heavy metals or mold toxins getting in the way. We might do organic acids testing, which is a wonderful test to look at different nutritional deficiencies that might be present, to look at the presence of oxidative stress or toxicity in general, or even sometimes you can look at the possibility of microbial imbalances like yeast or Clostridia. So that can be a really helpful test. And then also we do a lot of hormone testing, looking at the different levels of cortisol, the different levels of estrogen, testosterone, and their metabolites, and seeing if those are in balance. So I don't really say that everyone needs to do all of these. Usually I work with people in trying to create a list of priorities based off of what your body is telling us. Where are the most important pieces of the puzzle that we need to address, so that we can really start to pull things together. And sometimes, you can really, get pretty far with some of the quick fixes that we talked about before, or with simply just trial and error and symptom analysis. So beyond that, a functional nutritionist like myself would help you personalize your diets by removing foods that are inflammatory, either from symptoms or from testing. And then also help you include foods that support specific nutritional needs based off of testing or based off of what your symptom presentation might be or diagnoses. And then also helping you to tailor those meals based on taste preferences. We want you to be enjoying your foods, of course, and also we want you to be able to prepare them. We don't want you to have to rely entirely on any kind of meal preparation service, or even on your mom or dad or someone, your partner, to make meals for you. We want you to feel independent and to create a sustainable relationship with food. And of course, we would work with you on a regular basis to make sure that it's safe and efficacious for you, and ultimately working towards getting you on your own 2 feet that way. We will also create a supplement protocol, And so this is something that really requires a lot of knowledge based off of what you know to be efficacious, what supplements work, what supplements are safe, and also being able to kind of create the puzzle of combining different things that the individual might need in order to reduce cost and inconvenience, right? We're always trying to combine what we need in order to make it as cost effective as possible, and also to incorporate the therapeutic dosing that is necessary to really get the results that we want. And that's where I feel like a lot of people that try to take supplements on their own kind of miss out, is they're really taking very low doses of many things and they're not really getting the full therapeutic potential out of it. So another thing to consider is that quality really matters. And this is where a wide variety of different possibilities could occur from taking the same supplement, right? Sometimes they're contaminated, sometimes they're not even in there, and sometimes they're just really not the right therapeutic dose. And so working with someone like myself can be a great way to kind of get right to the ball of which supplements are good quality, which ones are going to work for you, and what dose to take. We also provide emotional support, and this is something that I find is really critical to my practice and unique from mainstream medicine, because you really sometimes need to be able to address emotions and how they're playing a role in your ability to implement on a protocol, right? I can tell you 500 things to do, but if they're all overwhelming, or if they're not within your lifestyle or cultural preferences, then we're going to have issues. We're not going to get results. And so we want to be able to address that and to see what kind of negative belief patterns might be inhibiting you, and also how we can begin to develop a more positive mindset and incorporate more positive emotional behaviors and thoughts to optimize your results. And this is actually a whole field of research where beliefs and positive emotions make or break sometimes the efficacy of a particular protocol. They have groups of people that believe that food might be giving them more nutrition, and then they have groups of people that might have no beliefs at all. And then and they eat the same exact thing, and the group that believes that it's giving them more nutrition actually absorbs more of those nutrients. And so there's a lot of evidence to show that emotions and beliefs are absolutely critical for the success of a program. And more importantly than not, you definitely don't have to do this on your own. That is probably one of the most important parts of addressing any kind of major lifestyle change, is making sure that you have support, whether that's from a professional or from a friend or a support group or a therapist. Is just making sure that you have someone to reflect on and to relate with throughout that process. So my question for you is, have you ever felt like you were sick of traditional approaches, right? Just being handed a bunch of medications or a bunch of dead-end methodologies? Are you needing maybe some more support on just implementing some of the basics, some of the quick fixes, diet, exercise, stress management? Are you maybe needing some more personalized answers or some more in-depth evidence-based approaches to what you're experiencing in your body? Or just in general, are you finally just ready for that therapeutic approach that's really going to hit the nail on the head in an individualized way, so that you're not continuing on a trial and error journey anymore? Well, if so, I would invite you to consider working with me. I have a master's degree in nutrition. I'm board certified. I'm also licensed as a dietitian nutritionist. I have many years of experience working with people of all different kinds of health backgrounds. I've also suffered, unfortunately, from a lot of these different issues, such as mold toxicity. I've had SIBO. I've had hormonal imbalances, low testosterone. And so this is definitely an area that I'm passionate about, and I really like to walk people through that process of self-discovery.